Peace and love, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the Ram Book Club, Resurgence of the African Mind, where we seek to liberate African minds by reading one unit of work at a time. My name is Lily Lapoete Speaks. You can check out my work, my blog at www.lilylapoetespeaks.com. I am happy to be here with everyone tonight. I'm glad everybody can join us. We're going to let the panel introduce themselves.
Peace and love. This is your sister, Dr. Maat. Happy to be on the panel. Family, please check out my Truth to Talk. It's called Truth to Power Talk with Dr. Maat. I normally go live Monday through Thursday at 8 o'clock p.m. So when you get an opportunity, check it out. I've been interviewing experts, PhDs. They come on the show. We talk about all sorts of things: history, politics, social issues. So check out the show when you get a chance. Again, happy to be on the panel, and I'm looking forward to discussing the second half of part 2 of Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. Peace and love.
All right. Peace and love, family. This is Brother Cahoon. Cahoon. I am so excited again to go through one of Dr. Naeem Akbar's books. Um, I'll give you more of a detailed explanation of who I am at another time, but the main thing for me is reading our African scholars' work, understanding who we are as Africans, and restoring the African mind. And thank you so much. Peace and love.
All right. So last week we discussed the first half of part 2. We talked about the importance of knowledge of self, the importance of celebrating ourselves. We also talked about the process of slave making. And so tonight we're going to discuss is one section called Only the Brave Need to Apply, Emoja or Unity,
Oh,
the evidence of things unseen, and let's get to work. So, Brother Canoon, go ahead and spark it off. Only the brave need to apply. What did you get
uh,
out of this particular section, brother?
hey, you just have to read the very first sentence. The process of mental liberation is not unlike many of the requirements of physical liberation. Freedom from captivity must be taken,
Mm,
not passively requested. I mean that negates the Democratic Party begging for justice. That negates all the begging from the different organizations that we talk about, that we hear about, that we're upset with, because we have to liberate ourselves. Your oppressor is not going to liberate you. We have to do it. Is it hard work? Absolutely. Do we have to be brave? Absolutely. Will we make mistakes? Absolutely. But like I tell people, I shared online before. If you want to see the real savior of this world, look in your mirror for 30 minutes.
mm.
And I'll just stop right there because we are the ones that are doing it. The whole purpose for African freedom must be done by Africans. Nat Turner, hey, he had to say, hey, look, some of us have to free ourselves from this situation. So I can say a lot of different things about that, but that's the main point from that entire thing.
Absolutely. I mean, like I just want to, like you always say, plus one, which you said. Um, it's not something that you got to beg for. We got to take it.
Yeah,
And I love how Dr. Naeem Akbar explained that. You're going to be facing dangers. You're going to be facing dangers. It's going to be hard. But you got to do it. And it's not an easy road. It's not a gold road, a gold paved road. It's a rocky road to freedom. And I think though that Brother Canoon, that a lot of us we we say that we want liberation. We say that we want liberation. We say that we want freedom, but we don't really know what it takes. We don't know the dedication, the sacrifice. And a lot of us aren't really willing to even make that sacrifice. A lot of us don't want to be comfortable. And remember, we talked about that last week. How a lot of us are really comfortable with the way things are. So, are you ready to skip a meal if need be? Are you ready to go to jail and get a record? Are you ready to take a bullet? I mean, these are some of these things are the price of freedom, the cost of freedom. And I just think that we say that a lot of us say that we want it, but I
yeah.
don't think that I don't think a lot of us are going to make the sacrifices to get it. What do you think, Sister Lily?
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how it is with, I guess, trying to reach any type of goal in general. That's why only a
True.
small amount of people actually accomplish a lot of things because they're not, the average person is not willing to pull it into work. And
Yeah.
in order to, especially as African Americans, in order to get to
the level that we need to be in this country, it's going to take a lot of work. And the bottom line is the average person is just not going to be willing to do it. They won't even put that much energy into themselves so that they can ultimately accomplish the things that they would like to accomplish in life. So we talking about on a grand scale, yeah, it's not gonna. People are just they're not interested as far as doing what it takes to get there, but they would love to get there.
Hmm.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes, yes,
absolutely.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
So,
you know, it's truly a wake up call as well. You know, like you said, it is not easy, but at the same time, you realize it's like, what else do you have to lose? We're all going to die eventually. That's just the bottom line. We all have to die, but isn't it better to die standing up than die on your knees, just begging and hoping for freedom? And I've come to that point in my life now where I'm like, hey, look, we've got to get some things done. And I understand why some of the ancestors, some of the people alive today are working with children because we want to plant those seeds in our children. But guess what? We have to take that pill and be the man and the women that we need to be for our children and our grandchildren.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And I also love how in this particular section he talked about people who are privileged, and how how
Oh yeah,
if you're a privileged slave, if you've met some economic status, or if you've reached or attained a certain level of education, then a lot of them are less prone to think that that we need liberation, that we need to fight for anything. They say, hell,
very
I make
true.
100. You got some folks that say, hey, I make 6K, I make six figures. What are you talking about? We're not free. Hell, I'm free. I make six figures. I live in this $500,000 house. And I'm just saying, not me, family. I'm just saying that you have some folks who have, obtained a certain level of, I guess, success, if that's what you define success as. But, they reach a certain level of success. And so they don't think that we need to be liberated. They think we are liberated. So what does the panel have to say about that?
I agree with you 100%. Uh, you, I mean, you just have the propaganda in America is so strong. They push individualism, and then the African who makes $100,000 to $600,000 a year. Well, I'm an individual. I made it. Just like Dr. Amos Wilson said, no, you didn't. It was not you who made that success. It was your ancestors before you who allowed you to get to that position in the first place. If it wasn't for Nat Turner and Ida B. Wells and all the people listed here, we would not even be able to be on the internet now. We would still be in slavery. So any type of success that we have is not just individual success. It's part of our a group as African people. So I'm just plus oneing what you say. We have to do it.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
then I love how in the section he says that when people talk about getting free, we're labeled as crazy, like the freedom fighters. And I thought about Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, actually, because
Yeah.
um, people thought that she was crazy when she presented her ideas in the ISIS paper and in the 90s, and she
Yeah.
started talking about genetic annihilation and all of that. People really thought this woman was out of her mind. but
Wow.
now but now in 2020, a lot of us are saying, wait a minute,
Hmm.
Doc was right. And so,
Hmm.
he says that, once you are designated as crazy, then your credibility is seriously compromised. And see, that's what they do to us a whole lot, Brother Canoe. Those who
Absolutely.
are fighting for us, they try to
Absolutely.
discredit them. So either you're labeled crazy or you're
Hmm.
charged with something. Notice
Yeah.
that, you're
Yeah.
put in, they try to defame you in the media.
Yeah.
They do defame you in the media if you, oh, I hear some static. But they defame you in the media, or label you crazy if you're out here fighting for black folks.
Exactly. Exactly. And even with the labeling and the calling of names and all that stuff, we still have to be steadfast in our vision, steadfast for our people, steadfast in everything that we're doing. And again, it's a personal decision that we have to make, but however, it's also a group decision. And again, that's why the Ram Book Club is so important, and the videos are so important, and reading these books are so important, because you'll come to the same conclusion that we must be the only people that save ourselves. We've got to do it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Jesus is not going to do it for you, and I know some
Ooh,
folks will probably drop off
all
when I
right
say
now.
that.
I know.
Look, look, as soon as you start, you know, with black folks, you can't talk about pork, Jesus, or Barack Obama. Look, somebody just dropped off. As soon as I said Jesus not going to do it, they got out of there. But we can't wait for anybody to come back and save us. We have to save ourselves. I mean, and that's just the reality. You know, that's the
Absolutely.
reality. But you know, he
Mhm.
goes on to say that the process of beginning to think new thoughts,
Thank you.
you know, is in a new consciousness is a lonely process. And
Yes.
so, you know, when you start, you know, like you said, you know, reclaiming our African consciousness, you know, you begin to think differently. I call it, well, a lot of the scholars call it the process of re-Africanization. And
Yes.
as you go through that process, you start to think differently. So, you know, if you think differently, you behave differently, right?
Yes.
You think differently, you behave differently, you might, you know, change your spiritual system, you might begin to
Yes.
dress differently, you may adopt a different language. You know, some of the things you used to do, you aren't doing anymore. Some of the people you used to hang around, you're not hanging around anymore. You know, the holidays you used to celebrate, you're no longer celebrating because you are going through this process of re-Africanization. And so he says that it's a lonely process.
Yeah.
It's a very lonely process. Go ahead.
Yeah. Cognitive. It's called cognitive dissonance because all of a sudden you realize that everything that you've been taught your entire life is untrue. You've been taught to be an American, or you've been taught to be a Brazilian, or you've been taught to be someone from the United Kingdom. But then you realize, guess what? I am truly an African first. That's why the police treat us this way. But once you accept your Africanness, just like you said, you begin to think new thoughts and your new consciousness begins to take over. And then it's why it's so important to study, to read, to watch the African cartoons, to watch those different things, because that will shore you up and restore who you truly are. You know, like you said, reading the ISIS papers by Dr. Francis Cresswell Wilson, reading all of Dr. Naim Akbar's books, reading or even going through the Ram Book Club's Amos Wilson's book, Blueprint for Black Power. You must restore ourselves as Africans, and I'll just stop it right there. We got to restore ourselves.
Yeah, so you know, so Dr. Naeem Akbar is saying, look, only the brave need to apply. He's saying that you might be labeled crazy,
Yes.
you'll face danger, you'll face isolation. You know what I mean? And he says, you know, so and you need courage to get through all of this. And then he goes
Mhm.
on to talk about how rebellious slaves have always been dealt with in a brutal fashion. And we already talked about what could possibly happen when you start fighting for the liberation of Black people. You could get
Mhm.
incarcerated, you may lose your life, you may die, you know, from a mysterious death,
Yes.
you know, so different things happen, you know, when you go out here. So it says he ends this section by saying, the more we know, the braver we become. He says, the stronger our pride and self love, the greater our courage. We must maintain association with newly escaped slaves. So basically, he's saying that we need to link up with like minded people
Mhm.
during this journey. So we got to hook up with like minded people, you know, throughout this journey. So he says we must maintain association with newly escaped slaves who know the price and the feeling of true mental liberation. There is strength in association. We must seek out colonies of maroons or runaways. He
Yes.
says and gains comfort from our association with like-minded souls. So family, you know,
Woo.
I know that this could be a lonely road, but know that there are other people who think like you. And so what we need to do is create spaces to connect with like-minded people. And so that's why these platforms are very important. You know,
Absolutely.
yeah, the Masi Warrior Clan, you know, that's a very important platform. Kofi Pie Side, Lila Poete Speaks, you know,
Yeah.
Dr. Maat. And so these platforms are very important because you know, it allows, you know, a space, you know, an opportunity for like-minded people to exchange ideas and to pull
Mhm.
their resources together to accomplish some objectives. And so, yeah, we have to.
Well,
We have
how do you guys think we can get our people to that point where they're willing to think objectively and maybe are not so caught up into the likes of the pseudo individuals that seem to keep their attention? Because that would be a problem, correct?
Yeah.
yeah,
Because it's
Yeah.
not that our people have an issue with listening to people, you know. It just depends on who we listen to.
facts.
Right. And that goes back to uh, politics and economics, right? The
Mm-hmm.
America has the power and the money to promote whatever they want to promote. All right, and that's the bottom line to all of those things. If all of us all of a sudden got $10 million, guess what? We'd build our platform 10 times, 10 times larger. We would be able to fund the schools that we had. But at this current time, you know what? Do what you can while you can. But yes, it is something that has to be overcome because media can put they can push Cardi B and all the rest and all the other things that are going on because they have the money and the power to do that. But as individuals, we have to take what power we do have and create meeting spaces like this and realize, hey, guess what? What little things can we do to strengthen what we are doing? If that makes sense. But no, you're right on it. You're right on it,
Well, I
Lily.
guess I just think about people who have really big platforms. Like, I don't want to drop people's names, but some of the people
I.
I'm talking about, Dr.
Mhm,
Maat.
Oh yeah, I
And it's
know.
like,
I
and
mhm,
know,
then
Queen.
you probably do too, Brother
mhm,
Newman. It's like
mhm.
you'll have the ability to where you can be teaching. You hundreds of thousands of people are
Yeah.
subscribed to you, and that's a lot of people that can get information and pass it on to the masses. And you know what I mean? And it's just really
Mhm.
unfortunate that we don't utilize our platforms that we do have for good, because platforms like this, it's hard to build them up because people, they don't want to hear the knowledge and the wisdom.
I
Yes.
couldn't agree with you more, Queen. And it gets frustrating for people like you, like myself, like
Mhm.
Mossy Warrior Clan. Like it gets frustrating, And like you said, I'm not going to call the names out, but I'm thinking of a particular person who have
Mhm.
360,000 subscribers right now, and
Mhm.
and he's feeding the masses a bunch of disinformation and malinformation.
Yeah.
And our people, I don't know, Queen. I mean, they are tuned into that stuff,
Yes,
and
they are.
yeah, they love it. They love the they like being miseducated. I ain't gonna say they like
Mm.
it, but they
Right.
gravitate towards the
Yes.
miseducation.
Yes.
They
Yes.
gravitate to it. So you raised a good question. You said, well, how do we then drive that traffic to platforms like this, platforms like Lily La Poete Speaks, Masi? What, like, how do we drive the traffic there? And that's a good question. And honestly,
Mm.
Queen, I don't know. I just don't know, because I think that all of these platforms, we go live, we bring on excellent people, we disseminate
Mm-hmm.
good information, but the people are just not tuned in.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. But somehow we have to put a little bit of money toward it to promote it because I've seen even on Facebook you can see the different things that are false that are sponsored. If you scroll through
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, sometimes you can see some of the insanity stuff that's sponsored. So even if we have to, for this book club, we can sponsor some of the videos, ones that are that you would prefer. That way more people will get their eyes on it. Now the problem with sponsoring something is you also get the critics that go with it. You also get the critics, and we have to also come to the point of where we exclude certain people. It's like, hey, guess what? You can follow us, but at the same time we might have to exclude you if you start going off kilter and start distracting people, because on other websites, guess what? They have no problem doing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so let's move on to the next section, emoja or unity.
Yes.
So in this particular section, he's talking about how there's powers in numbers and we should be united. And he was saying
Mhm.
that our disunity is one of our biggest issues. And
Yeah.
so he's promoting emoji, he's promoting unity, and he's saying that unity does not require uniformity. And Sister
Absolutely.
Alima and myself, we've been talking about that for years. We don't have to have the same.
Years.
Yeah, we don't have to have the same
Mhm.
religious and political and
That's right.
professional and
Yeah.
academic, similarities. Let's just create a
Yeah.
Right.
black united front and come up
Yes.
with an agenda,
Mm.
come up with an agenda, plan and,
Yes.
and execute that agenda. But
But
you
that's
know,
so hard to do, Queen, because a lot of people put their religion at the forefront
Oh.
before African liberation. And there's nothing on this earth that I'm going to do as far as, like that. I'm not putting anything, that nothing's more important than the liberation of African people.
come
So,
on.
Yes.
I mean, no
Yes.
matter what
Say
you,
it again.
that should be at the back burner, because at the end of the day, what you practice is for your own self fulfillment and your own self gain. So that shouldn't have anything to do with us as a people.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more, Queen. And you're right. They put their religious, um, beliefs,
First.
before African liberation. And I'm gonna even also say sexual orientation.
Oh my goodness.
Sexual
Yes.
orientation is one. People identify of this, they put that in the front, political affiliation, all of that, queen. So like I said, I couldn't agree with you more. African liberation should be, our highest priority. And so we had to set all of that stuff aside. You
Yeah.
put you defining yourself based on your daggone sorority or fraternity or
Right.
your church, denomination. Like, come on now. Like, we gotta do better, family. We gotta throw that stuff aside, cast that stuff aside, and establish a Black united front to get these things done.
Absolutely. And the,
Not
the
cast it aside. So you can tell your mother a minister, child. Not cast it aside, honey.
Lay it down for the Lord and cast your burdens at the table.
Go on now. See,
Oh,
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. God is good. Yes. Yeah.
wow.
Let me stop because somebody mad at me right now.
look, they laugh at brother Jemiah Africa. He's in the chat room cracking up, Sister Alima.
Oh,
Stop laughing,
that was
brother.
great. That was
You're making
great.
it worse. No, Dr. I always say stuff like that, but it comes from her mama.
It does.
Ah.
And it comes out. Look, it comes out when I speak. You like, oh my gosh. You tell you listen. You tell you live with a Baptist minister.
Oh my goodness, that was great. That was great.
Y'all silly.
Oh man, but that was funny, sis. That was so funny.
Oh,
Yeah, but so he talked about that, and then I like at the end of the section where he says there are so many musicians, comedians, and scholars who are
yeah.
rewarded for bringing messages which continue to tighten the mental chains. He says that some special use that our captors make of our gifts, we can use that to mentally liberate us. And so he's right. We have a lot of talents and skills. And so they use that. And like he says, to tighten up the chains. And so we can use those things to free us. And I was thinking about the music. Look at the music our children listen to nowadays. I mean,
Yes.
you got your Cardi B, your
Yep.
Nicki Minaj, and then you got the little baby, the baby, and I do, family. I ask my sons about these musicians, and I ask them, well, who are you listening to? Let me see what's on your playlist because I want to know what they're tuned into. And I say, son, in my day we had Master P and we had our ratchet music, but I
But
tell
not
them that.
degrading.
Yeah, but I think that when we were coming along, we still had our conscious artists with it because while we had Master P and all these people in the 90s, you still had other positive artists, a lot of positive artists, that kind of, I don't want to say offset it, but gave us a balance.
Exactly.
It seemed like now it's just you have a J. Cole, and for every J. Cole, you might got 13 other rappers that are just rapping about, death and destruction.
But you know what I noticed though, Queen, the difference between when we came up with music and now, back then it seemed like the music industry was actually willing to give people like a Lauryn Hill or
Exactly.
somebody
That's
like
true.
that a chance.
That's true.
But nowadays,
Exactly.
those type of people like Rhapsody and all of them, they got to push their own selves because
Yep.
the
Yeah.
major labels ain't trying to push that type of stuff. It just all they try to push is the Cardi B, Nicki Minaj type of music.
Yeah.
That's
right.
a fact.
That's
So
a
yeah,
absolutely.
that's a fact. That's a fact. And you're right, Rhapsody. I love her to death. She has an album out. Yeah, she has an album out called Eve. I bumped the first track, Nina Simone, and her last track, I think it's Afeni, Tupac Shakur's mother, Afeni. Afeni. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. And so, yeah, I mean, we gotta use that stuff to free us. He says musicians, comedians, scholars. We gotta use those tools to liberate our people. All right. So the next section is faith, evidence of things unseen. So he says probably the most, and I'm reading the first two sentences, probably the single most important quality used in the act of achieving physical liberation from slavery was the inner power to believe that freedom was possible. It took a strong, compelling belief that even though you could not see freedom and how to reach it, you knew it was possible and you were willing to confront all odds to obtain it. This is the power of faith. Amani, faith. Faith. And so our ancestors had to have faith. I remember, and I can't say I remember, but when Harriet Tubman was taking our ancestors and going to the plantation and taking those trips, they had to have faith, that they were going to be free. And they put their faith in her, and they put their faith in whatever, it might have been God, whatever spiritual, whatever deity, whatever, but they put their faith in something, and especially her, to lead them to freedom. And so our ancestors had faith. Nat Turner, he had faith. We know that he was a preacher, but he had faith.
Yeah.
He had faith. I'm thinking about everybody, Ida B. Wells, Fannie Lou
Hmm.
Hamer, a lot of those ancestors, Dr. King, Malcolm X, a lot of them had faith. I mean, otherwise you wouldn't do what you're doing, right? I mean, so the strength had to come from somewhere, and it was the faith, the evidence
Hmm.
of things unseen in order to accomplish, in order to move and do things. So, panel.
I agree, Queen.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just read what it says on page 45 toward the bottom. Faith must be acquired from within. We have the faith in many other things, but guess what? We must have the faith to be set free,
Mm.
completely free. We must have the faith, even though other people will doubt Africans can unify, even though other people will doubt, A, B, C, and D, we must have the faith and continue our journey on this road. Because if you can vision that Africans can be free, it can be possible. And I'm beginning to understand what that means. Even like reading Steve Biko's story and other stories from the continent of Africa about how different tribes fought back and how they restored who they really were. You know, at some point you have to take the faith and say, you know what, this is the road I'm on, and I'm not stopping. I'm not going to stop. That's faith.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Hmm.
that is faith.
Hmm.
That is faith. And he says that faith is, it gives us courage, it gives us
Hmm.
inspiration. And so we need faith. Faith is very, very vital, in this liberation. We have to have faith. I'm looking at my
Yeah.
Kwanzaa principles to my left, and it says,
Hmm.
our faith is to believe with all our hearts in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. Imani, faith,
Mhm. And if you think
faith.
about it, aren't we carrying on what our ancestors started? I mean, over 200,000 years ago? Even though went through the Middle Passage and were put in slavery, went through all the stuff that we're doing, are we not truly doing what they're doing? It's like, hey, guess isn't it time to restore the African mind? Isn't it time to restore what being an African is? All those
Hmm.
things that they left for us. I'm sure Dr. Naim Akbar read those things as well. He's like, hey, guess what? We need to restore the faith in the African person because that's who we truly are. So it's something that is not really outside of us. It's something that was really in us already that we just haven't tapped into, or we haven't pushed everything else aside to realize that we have yet. So,
Absolutely.
mhm.
Absolutely. And so the last section is entitled, Let's Get to Work.
Amen.
He says that each of us has to make the commitment to engage in the personal and collective job of freeing ourselves from mental slavery. He says that the strategies we have outlined above will assist us in changing our consciousness is a continuous process. So it's an ongoing thing. You can't expect to read, Dr. Naim Akbar's book, Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery, and say, I'm free. So
Right.
it's a continuous, process. And I believe that I remember in a lecture, Dr. Amos Wilson said that Carter G. Woodson said that it took him nearly 30 or 40 years to re-Africanize his mind. And so
Yes.
it's a continuous process. It's also a lengthy process. He also says we must work to re-educate ourselves and our young people
Mhm.
by seeking and studying new information about ourselves. So that's
Yes.
why it's important, family, to tune into platforms such as this,
Yes.
platforms such as the Massey Warrior Clan. You have pseudo killers with Brother Onk and them. And so it's a lot of well, I ain't gonna say it's a lot, but there's several platforms out there, that are disseminating, good information. And so we have to re-educate ourselves and our children. Please turn off
Yes.
Disney and Nickelodeon. Put on some kid positive. Tell me who I am, or some Meltrek, and educate our babies. He says we must find every opportunity to celebrate ourselves. So we have to also stop celebrating these European holidays.
Ooh.
I forgot who I brought on the platform. I don't know if it was Anthony T. Browder who said it,
Okay.
or I don't know if it was Dr. Takai or Dr. Patricia Newton, but I brought an elder on, and they talked about, just getting rid of. No, it was Professor James Small. That's who it was, Professor James Small. On, I brought him
Oh,
on to talk about Juneteenth, and he said you should not be out there running around on July the 4th.
yeah,
He said don't go out on July the 4th, and he named like a few other holidays. He said Thanksgiving, that's another one. He said don't
yep,
celebrate that. We have to celebrate ourselves, celebrate
absolutely.
our heroes and sheroes and our events. So we gotta do that. So then he says we must find every opportunity to educate ourselves, and we must challenge the fear that causes us to hesitate in taking the chains out of our minds. We must work together,
Mm,
and we must have faith that our struggle will be successful regardless of the opposition. I'm going to read just the first sentence on the last paragraph. He says, the first step is acknowledgement of our slave mentality
mm,
and the
mm,
fact that we remain limited in our effectiveness because of the slavery experience. Now,
mm,
see, Sister Lily, I think that's the hard part right there.
mhm,
That's right. That's right.
Acknowledging, because
mm.
they always say when you want to change something, the first step is to recognize it or acknowledge it. But a
That's
lot
right.
of us have been bamboozled by the illusion of freedom that we don't even think that, we have a slave mentality. We think we're free.
That's
So that
Mm.
ooh,
Yes.
facts.
Yeah. So to me, that's going to be the hardest part, being able to convince Black folks that they're mental slaves.
That's right.
Yeah, that's true. There's so much in that because once you accept the fact that you are a mental slave, that means that now you got to do something about it. That's
Mm,
the problem with that because like I talk to my children about maturity. Okay, I always talk to my kids about being mature and acting a certain way. Okay, at a certain age, you have to, at 5 years old, I expect you to act a certain way. At 15-year-old, you need to be different, but it still takes responsibility to say, hey, guess what? I realize that I am a mental slave to all the things I've been lied to for over the last 30 or 40 years of my life. But guess what? Now it's my responsibility to find other people that are like minded to get free.
Exactly.
That's a big responsibility. But guess what? He says
absolutely.
only the brave need to apply. Guess what? Everyone that's listening, guess what? You are part of the brave people who have taken the first step, and we need more people that are brave that says, hey, guess what? I'm tired of being a slave. I'm tired of being a mental slave, and it's time to get free. It's time.
Mm.
It's time.
Well, we do have a question in the chat room. Brother Cohen Davis asks, is Dr. Naeem Akbar still alive? He absolutely is. In fact,
Yes.
he signed 20 autographed, well, he autographed 20 copies of his book. So if, 20 people actually got a copy or autograph from Dr. Naeem Akbar. So he's still alive. He's retired. Um, and I think he's almost 70 years old, Brother Kanoum, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I
But
believe so.
he's up there. But he's definitely still alive, Brother Cohen Davis. Brother Zane asked, he said, can you speak on how parents who do not pass any skill or inheritance to their offspring?
Well, that goes back to culture. Again, for us in the African culture, the African culture has been decimated. you know, uh, Rap videos is not African culture. Football and sports is not African culture. We have a quasi African culture, but again, it's up to us to study uh, the greats and restore what true African culture is. How can a parent truly know what parenting is if you've never been taught that? Think about it. We haven't been taught properly. We've not been taught to
And
parent
majority
properly.
of us
Mhm.
don't leave any money for our children or anything for our children. So I'm just wondering what people specifically is he talking about, because that almost applies to African Americans as a whole. And I would say the major reason for that is, like Brother Kanoum said, we haven't been educated, and secondly, we haven't been given the fair advantage to even acquire certain things, or the know-how to even be able to leave something for your children. So the first step
That's
would
good.
be in education. And
Yes.
considering that most of us haven't been educated in that manner, you can't expect someone to automatically know that.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Like you said, there were things, and I mean, this is just on a personal tip.
Mhm.
My family, well, when I got older, my mom and my auntie, they had credit cards and stuff, and when I was in college, I had a credit card. but they didn't know until we were grown, my generation, that you can get a credit card, pay
Mm-hmm.
on that, add your child's name to that
Mm-hmm.
card, pay on that card. And so by the time your child gets 18 or 19, they're walking away with an 850 credit score. Like you can actually build your child's credit score. But like Sister Alima said, they didn't know, sis. You know what I mean? Like they had no idea. But
Right.
but now that we know, with my children, I have a card that I've added, actually three cards that I've added their names to, and so
Very
I'm
wise.
paying on it, right? Paying on it so that by the time, well, Harvey and Isaiah are both 20 and 21, but Jalen is 10. So Jalen will have an 800 or 850, credit score. You get what I'm saying? So Queen, you're 100%
Absolutely.
right. We don't know what we don't know. But
Right.
Mm-hmm.
but now that we do know that, in generations to come, I'm pretty sure they're going to do that with their children. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I
Yes.
mean? And then also life insurance policies.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother, she left a life insurance policy, but it was just enough to cover her burial expenses.
Yes.
It wasn't enough to like pay off her debt or to leave any money behind. But my mother's generation learned from that, and they said, well, with our children, we're going to get a hefty life insurance policy, and they have done that, and I'm doing that actually with so you get what I'm saying? Like Sister Lima
Right.
said, it goes back
Which,
to just
yeah.
it just goes back to, if you don't know what you don't know,
Right.
and so I
Exactly.
see it turning around in my family. But for years, like you said, we didn't know.
Right. And that goes back again to culture. Once we restore our African culture, that will be automatic. It will be automatic. And then the wealth will begin to build again. And we will continue to buy land and all those different things to keep in our family, to have a place to call home always, whether it's here on the continent of the United States or if it's even in Africa. But once we know these things, guess what? We can pass it on to our children, and they'll pass it on to their grandchildren, and so on and so on. Yes.
Absolutely. Brother Jabon in the chat, he said financial literacy was not introduced to our community. It
That's right.
wasn't. It wasn't.
Mm-mm. No,
It wasn't.
nope, nope, no. But I will add something to what, it was not introduced into our community, but I will say this. If we go back two or three generations, after our ancestors were freed, they bought so much land. They may not have
Yep.
had degrees, but they knew that buying land would take care of their family. That's
Facts.
something this generation did not learn. The generation before us didn't learn that either. But our great parents or our great grandparents knew that, hey, guess what? We need to buy some land.
That's
And
right.
I'll say this out loud. Do not sell your parents' land. Do
And
not
their
do it.
house.
In their
Yes,
houses. That's
Right.
right.
yes.
Pay
Keep
the
it.
taxes.
Woo!
People, let me say this.
Say it, girl.
Pay
Say it.
the taxes on your family's land and property. It's so disheartening to hear so many people's grandparents that have now passed on, and they've had a house for 30 years. And
Yeah.
all their grandkids and kids had to do was pay 1,200 a year to keep
Hmm.
their house. And for you to just let that go shows a lack of, first of all, a lack of care for your grandparents and the dedication and hardness that it took for them to
Mm,
pay
mm.
off a mortgage in 30 or 40 years just for you to let it go in a year because you don't pay the taxes. Like, we have to stop doing that type of stuff. And now some white man gets to go and buy grandma's house and resell it again. And what are we
Exactly.
left with? Nothing.
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 That's right.
And I see
Thank you.
another comment. Brother Tariq, Jabal El Tariq, you said another generation of integration is not liberation. We didn't talk about integration.
Huh?
So brother, I don't even understand
Yes.
that comment. He said another generation of integration is not liberation. So yeah, I don't understand.
I mean, I get what he's saying, but that's not what we're talking about. So,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
we're not talking about that. So we're getting ready to close up, family. Join us back here next week to talk about the first half, or to discuss the first half of the last part, the third part of breaking the chains of psychological slavery. I'm gonna be going live again in the next 5 minutes because I'm gonna have the Hoppy Film producers are coming on in about 15 or 20 minutes. And so you'll probably get another alert if you are subscribed to my channel. You'll get another alert that I'll be live at 8 o'clock to speak with the Hoppy producers. So that's
ah,
gonna that's
That's
gonna be a
great.
good that's gonna be a good build tonight. It's gonna be a good build tonight. But panel, do you have any closing words?
no, thank everybody for joining us. Another good build, as always, on the Ram Book Club. And I just hope everybody has a good week, and please stay safe.
And I'll just plus one what she said. Thank you for everyone who's joined. Keep studying, keep watching Dr. Maat's videos, and keep the faith.
All right. All right, family. So join us back here, the RAM Book Club, next week to discuss the second half. I'm sorry, the first half of the third part, the last part of Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery. Peace and love.
Peace and
Peace.
love.